What's going on, guys? Back again today to talk to you guys about some more comic book news, comic book stuff. I did a video not too long ago talking about the newly announced comic imprint called Ghost Machine. That is basically just like every one of DC's best talent, just like left DC Comics and like went to their it's under Image Comics. It's published by Image Comics, but the imprint is called Ghost Machine, and it's their own thing. And I'm gonna give you guys an update on Ghost Machine because their launch title for Ghost Machine, Ghost Machine number one, is out. I don't have a physical copy of it. I read it digitally online. However, in preparation for it, I did go pick up the trade paperbacks of Geiger, Junkyard Joe, and issues 1 and 2 of Geiger Ground Zero. So I've been reading, I read all of that already at this point, and I gotta tell you guys, all this plus I did read Ghost Machine number one. This is gonna be big. This is going to be like, I'm not saying it's going to kill DC and or Marvel. What I'm saying is this is going to be such a competitor in the market that it's going to breathe new life into the market. And we're probably going to see uh, DC and Marvel both improving over the next year or two because holy shit. I wish I'd have known about this earlier. So Jeff Johns and Gary Frank, who Jeff Johns is a comic book author, Gary Frank is an illustrator, he does the artwork. Those two love working together, and they teamed up. And at first they called the imprint was called Mad Ghost, but it's since been changed to Ghost Machine. And their whole thing was they did these two titles together. Geiger was first, and then Junkyard Joe was second, and they started forming this idea for a comic book universe called The Unnamed. And The Unnamed is one of the brands under the Ghost Machine imprint, and it's the one that's going to be the biggest. I can tell you that. After having read all of this plus Ghost Machine number one, The Unnamed is going to be huge. The Unnamed is basically like it's a bunch of characters. Some of them are from like American fiction. We're talking about characters like Davy Crockett, George Washington, who else? There's a few others in here. There's actually a whole timeline in the back of the book that tells you a lot of different stuff. But anyway, yeah, not Paul Bunyan, but like you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of these like fictional characters from like American literature and whatnot and American folk tales. And then there's some that they are their own original creations. Like Geiger and Junkyard Joe are their own original creations. And Redcoat is also a member of this. There is no Redcoat book in and of itself out yet. It was supposed to come out, and then I think they just kind of like held off on releasing it because they decided to just release it as part of the full-on Ghost Machine release. But the Unnamed is one. It's a shared comic book universe. The characters are Geiger, Junkyard Joe, Redcoat, the Northern. I think he's called the Northerner. Let's see here on this timeline sheet in the back of the Geiger trade paperback where it gives you kind of like the timeline of the Unnamed. It says 1776 Redcoat becomes immortal. So that's talking about the character Redcoat. Simon Pure is his real name. 1864, the Northerner begins his hunt. So the Northerner is another character in this universe. 1944, the monster is made. I have a feeling this is referring to some kind of like Frankenstein shit. 1972, Junkyard Joe comes online. So that's Junkyard Joe. 1997, American Widow X has her revenge. American Widow X is another character, part of the Unnamed. 2025, The First Ghost is captured on film. First Ghost is another character. And then in 2030, it says The Unknown War erupts. and then in 2050 Geiger walks across America. So that is something that is hinted at a lot throughout the Unnamed. They talk about this thing called the Unknown War, and it seems to be almost like a shadow war across time. And there are certain historical prominent figures throughout history who history won't necessarily remember. That's why they're called the unnamed. It's like they won't necessarily go down in history and be remembered, but they are incredibly important because they are integral to this like shadow war that's going on in the background. Uh, it's phenomenal. I'm loving the unnamed. It's it's fantastic. So that's the big one out of Ghost Machine that everyone should be paying attention to is the unnamed. Um, if you haven't already, go to your local comic book store. If they sell trade paperbacks in any serious quantity, they should have the Geiger and Junkyard Joe initial trade paperbacks. Just go to the Image Comics trade paperback section in your store, and they should have these, and you can get a head start on those characters. This two-part little limited series, Geiger Ground Zero #1 and #2, is kind of like a precursor. This was made, the original 6-issue series, Geiger, was written as like its own thing prior to uh, all these creators coming together to create Ghost Machine. They didn't. This was made before they knew it was going to turn into what it's turning into. And then this little two-part series seems to be like they made this to kind of like tie this into the greater Ghost Machine stuff. So this is also really good, enjoyable. Jeff Johns is one of the greatest comic book writers of all time, if not the greatest. Gary Frank very well might be my favorite comic book artist. So I like there was no way I was ever gonna hate this series. It was a guaranteed hit in my books. So the unnamed Geiger, Junkyard Joe, Redcoat, all of those titles should be in your pull list. And then the other big one from Ghost Machine that is teased in Ghost Machine #1 is Rook Exodus. This is its own thing. It's not associated with the unnamed, so it has nothing to do with Geiger or Junkyard Joe or any of those characters. Redcoat, none of them. It's its own thing. Basically, it takes place in the future where they sent a bunch of colonists to a planet to colonize it, terraform it, whatever. And there were these, every aspect of this planet is controlled through technology. The weather and the animals and the plant life, everything is controlled by technology. And they picked out certain members of the colonists and gave them these helmets that could control a specific animal type. And those people were called the Wardens. So like there's a chick that has like this wolf helmet and she can kind of communicate and control wolves. And Matt, take like the concept of Ant-Man, take out the shrinking and just leave the like communicating with ants and you basically have it, but there's a chick that does this for wolves. The main character is called Rook and he can control like crows and ravens and stuff like that. There's another dude that's called Swine. Obviously, he can control like wild boars and pigs. It sounds kind of goofy, but when you look at the artwork, Jason Fabok is the artist, and I think Jeff Johns is the writer on that as well. And Jason Fabok is the artist, and Jason Fabok is another phenomenal comic book artist right now. Uh, it sounds kind of goofy and silly, but when you read the story and you see the art, you're kind of like, this oddly is working for me right now. And basically, the corporation or government or combination of the two that decided to colonize this planet in the first place, all of a sudden just up and gave up on it. But they left all these people here. So now the whole planet is falling into anarchy and chaos, and anyone who can come up with a way off planet is doing it. And that's this character Rook. He's one of the wardens. Right now he's currently like working with another warden named Swine, and he's obsessed with trying to build a rocket to get off this planet. And that's the general premise, but there's other forces at work that like, now that the government and or corporate interests have left this planet, there's a power vacuum. So there are certain forces that are like, oh, we can, maybe take control, and yeah, there's a lot going on in it, and it's like I said, sounds a little goofy and silly. Animal controlling helmets. Check it out. I'm telling you, you're gonna read it and be like, this is oddly working for me. I don't like it's weird, but it's weird that it's working, but it's working. I'm liking it. So that's the other big one from Ghost Machine that I think is going to be a pretty significant hit. The other ones are their horror universe called Hyde Street. Um, I've never found that the horror genre really excels outside of film and television because I don't know. There's just something about it being two dimensional on a page, especially if it's just printed word. It's like a novel. Like I've never read a novel that really was like scary. You know what I mean? There has to be a visual medium to it, and I almost feel like it has to be motion visual. So like images on a page, especially like illustrated, drawn images. Just it's just not. I don't know how scary it's going to be able to be, and that's the whole point of it. Is it's their horror universe called Hyde Street. It's their horror universe, but I don't think it's going to be very scary. What I read of it wasn't very scary, so it's just I'm kind of like I don't know. I'm not completely turned away from it. I'm going to keep checking it out, but I'm just kind of like eh. And then they have their kind of like more what seems to be like they're more like kid-friendly, light-hearted, slice of life kind of story, which is called The Rockefellers, and it's like this family is in the witness protection program from the future, so they hide them. I can't remember. See, this is how much I really just didn't really care for this story. I can't. There's a lot about it I don't really remember. They're in the witness protection program from like a highly advanced society. I don't know if it's the future or another reality, but and then they decide that like to put them up in a safe house and keep them in witness protection in I can't remember if it was in like the past or the future or another reality. But that's the thing. It's like a family is in the witness protection program in kind of like with a sci-fi theme twist to it. So yeah, kind of sounds interesting, but it's not like action packed and gritty and suspenseful and compelling. It's kind of like, oh, what is it's you remember that show, that Disney Channel show Phil of the Future? It kind of reminds me of that with a little bit of like if anyone's seen Solar Opposites on Hulu, um, that it also kind of has that vibe to me. It's like a combination between Phil of the Future and Solar Opposites. Like it's not bad, and I'm sure there are people out there who are like, this is exactly their cup of tea, but it just wasn't mine. And compared with The Unnamed and Rook Exodus and even Hyde Street, my prediction is that The Rockefellers is probably going to be their least popular book. So take that for what you will, but it is what it is. I am in love with this Ghost Machine shit. I think it is a huge step in the right direction for the comic book industry. I'm so grateful that all these creators have done it. Uh, I think the Unnamed specifically is going to be a huge, huge hit. I think it's going to kind of jumpstart the creative juices in the industry overall. I think a lot of these companies like Marvel and DC, the big two, that have kind of gotten complacent and think that they're too big to fail. So let's not bother telling good stories. Let's focus more on pushing a socio-political agenda because we don't need to tell good stories. Our sales are guaranteed anyway. We're Marvel and DC, so we might as well use our time to do something else like push a socio-political agenda. So I think this is going to kind of like shock. It's going to deliver like a shock to the system of the comic book industry that it desperately needs, and it's going to get all the companies. It's going to get their creative juices flowing again through competition. Like I think that's what's been lacking in the comic book market is competition. I think it's been like Marvel and DC are kind of like beep, oh every decade Marvel and DC are kind of like beep, 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 and then other than that it's just like but they're relatively equal to one another and then other than that there's been no real competition. There's been no one else could come along and really take a bite out of their revenue and kind of, give them a good kick in the ass and be like, hey man, like you got to stop being complacent. You got your shit together. So I think that's what this is going to do on top of Eric July's Rippaverse, which is also really successful. I'm going to be doing a video on the Rippaverse here in the near future, giving you an update on that. So stay tuned for that. But that's pretty much all I have to say about Ghost Machine. I highly recommend you check it out. Head to your local comic book store and check out anything and everything from Ghost Machine and the Unnamed, Rook Exodus, all of it. So, yeah, if you like this video, please hit that like button. It really helps out the channel. And if you want to help out my channel even further, check out some of my other videos and subscribe. Other than that, I'll see you guys next time.